15th of December 2023. In this edition of What You Sow, You Will Reap, I want to talk in general about what happened to South Africa. And I know there's going to be hundreds of people that are going to try and tell me and point out I was making a mistake here and making a mistake there. I'm not really interested in those opinions. I'm not trying to be historical correct, encyclopedia quality. I'm going to give you an overview. And just to remind you that these evil fuckers plan well ahead. I'm going to mention it again. On the 16th of June, 1898, the Khazarians in America, New York, gave an instruction to the Khazarians in London to kill the Boer children. And the British executed that command in South Africa by killing thousands of Boer children in the concentration camps. Keep that in mind. Now, the National Party was very successful in building a modern South Africa. Build South Africa into the best economy in Africa, the most advanced country in Africa, railway system best in the southern hemisphere, many things like that. You know those things. At the same time, it developed a civil service that was rated as one of the best and most efficient in the world. In the world. Did that sink in? How did they do that? First of all, the National Party managed to use that construct of Afrikaner to unite the vast majority of white people in South Africa as a unit under that emblem, Afrikaner. And they did it well. And under their tight control over the media and over everything, you know what it was like. They managed to keep the discussion about the existence of the Boer tribe off the discussion tables. The greatest achievement they had was that illusion that they created and maintained of Afrikaners. Now, during the National Party's time, they had the opposition, liberal English opposition, and people like de Villiers Graaf and Helen Suzman and Van Zyl Slabbert and guys like that, Tony Leon and Helen Zille. All of them were opposition to the National Party, but they were never a threat to the National Party. But while the National Party was operating, this liberal side were undermining the National Party. Yes, the National Party dealt ruthlessly with those they caught out. And today, Helen Zille can brag from a public stage how she hid ANC cadres in her home and shit like that. Well, let that be. The biggest tragedy was the killing of Verwoerd, because Verwoerd was standing against XXX. And Verwoerd understood that South Africa is a region, not a country. And he foresee that there will come a time that the diversity will break the unit apart. And he was laying the foundations to make that break apart, not a catastrophe, but planned. And they had to kill him. And after Verwoerd, the last leader The national, Verwoerd's killing created cracks in the National Party. But the last patriotic leader we had was P.W. Botha. And P.W. Botha was also against XXX. But XXX is powerful, and they're ruthless, and they get what they want. The ANC was this underground resistance movement, but XXX had plans for that, and they had to get rid of PW. And eventually they got rid of PW. And then de Klerk and his fucking gang came in. And that is when the treason started. And for money, South Africa was sold to XXX. And you know how everything fucking fell apart. And what was involved there. We're sitting still today with our rotting corpses, and we're sitting today still with fuckers walking around that should be under the ground and cock like that. But that's only important. Let's get to the ANC. So, the ANC, they like to say they were freedom fighters and the fuck knows what. They fought for fuck all, man. They got it. It was given to them on a silver platter. They were given to them on a silver platter. South Africa was placed on the platter, and de Klerk and his cronies were the waiters that handed it over to the ANC. And that's what happened. So here we sit with a resistance movement. A resistance movement that had a lot of support across the black nations because of this unified enemy they had, apartheid. All of a sudden, the ANC is now in charge. Now, the first thing that you need to look at, first reality, the National Party represented a unified group of Afrikaners, white nationalist Afrikaners, which was the majority of the whites. That is what the NP represented. What does the ANC represent? They represent an illusion. They don't represent a tribe or a nation or nothing, or a cultural group, fuck all like that. They represent an idea, anti-apartheid. And even today, every now and then you hear the words, guys got struggle credentials and cuck like that. But what they are in essence is a gang of criminals in charge of the country. And you have to just look at the realities, how they've been stealing and enriching themselves. Look at how they allowed the whole government civil service to fucking collapse. Infrastructure collapse, railways gone, Eskom or hanging on by its nails. Cock like that. I don't need to discuss it. You know that they fucked the country up in totality. Why did they do that? Because they don't have any fucking commitment to any group of people in this country. No nation. They do favor the Xhosas for historical reasons. But the rest, they don't give a shit. Nothing. Now, and this is what you have to keep in mind. This non-representative grouping, what the hell is their goal? If you want to know what their goal is, you have to go and ask XXX what the goal is, because the ANC don't know. They just get their commands and their instructions and they do it. But now we're sitting with a problem. We need to figure out what is the end goal. It is my opinion that they know, XXX knows, that this country as a unitary state cannot go on, because it's a region, it's not a country. And I believe that the end goal is what Verwoerd had in his vision. South Africa will be balkanized. South Africa is going to break into pieces. 10, 12, 14 pieces. That is inevitable. But before that happens, Cyril must make sure that the stage is set properly. The stage is set properly for that. It is going to be a planned collapse, just like the USSR was collapsed. And think back what happened in the USSR. The USSR collapsed after the oligarchs was in control of all the previous state assets, all the natural resources of Russia in the hands of the oligarchs. And this is what Cyril is, that is his mission. He must do that for XXX. And the last clearly identifiable state asset that needs to be given to the oligarchs is Eskom. And he's getting a lot of resistance from the public about that. So they're bullying us with the load shedding to make us willing to agree for him to sell Eskom on the promise that load shedding will be gone. But something happened last week that should make you pay attention. And that was that loan from the IMF, from the World Bank. And part of the conditions of that loan was that the national grid must be chunked out of Eskom. So I'm getting the idea that the grid, the selling of the grid, privatizing of the grid, will be the trigger moment for the collapse of the Republic. Because whoever controls that grid controls the whole region with one switch. Plus, this farce of a fucking green plan, through that Cyril has managed to create the so-called IPPs. They're not IPPs, they're subcontractors to Eskom. To create them and all his cronies and close friends has got the major controls in that. And through Motsepe, Johan Rupert has got control. Johan Rupert owns a fucking taxi association. Think about these things, guys. So the oligarchs has basically got about everything. We know now that Praveen was involved in deals of moving SOEs into other companies on the quiet in the background under dodgy circumstances. They deny its privatization, which I will agree with. It's not privatization, it's moving the assets into the hands of the criminal gangs. Now in Russia, the oligarchs kept their control over the country through a hell of a big crime network. And if you look what is happening in South Africa, the crime network is now beginning to become clearly visible. They're active in the ports, they're active in the road transport, they're active in the taxi industry, they're active in Eskom, they're active in Transnet, they're all everywhere they're active. So that crime network is there. It is those criminals that are going to jump for turf. So you may be living in a suburb somewhere in one of the cities, and the next morning that crime boss will be in control of your area. So that is what Cyril is, that's his mission. That's what I believe is his mission, and the things that is happening looks to me like that is where he is going. South Africa is going to break apart. It is impossible for the thing to survive. It cannot. Because for a state to be stable, it must stand on top of a solid, well-functioning civil service. There is no more civil service. And another worrying thing for you that you must take note of is all of a sudden Gauteng with that Lesotho Brigade. Now we hear the EFF is getting their own security company, and there's rumors all over the place about shit like this. Guys, right under our eyes, they're busy constructing militias. Don't forget that. These militias are built under false pretenses. These militias are the ones that are going to assist the criminal gangs to grab territory. Listen to what I'm saying to you. Now we see fracture in the ANC. People splitting off from the ANC, leaving the ANC and start their own political party. Leaving the ANC, start their own political party. Now there's some of those political parties now they ganging in with the EFF. There's rumors that Zuma is going to establish his own political party. That is going to be a problem for the ANC, a major fucking problem for the ANC. And the reality is that Zuma don't like Cyril and he doesn't like the EFF. So, they're fracturing. They're no more a unit. They're going the same way that the National Party went. And we have got a problem in Zululand. Through XXX support, Cyril has basically captured the Zulu Royal House. Now, that could be a trigger for a civil war in Zululand. And if a civil war breaks out in Zululand, it will spill over into the rest of the country just like that. And as I said many times in previous Skidmarks, the moment that we get into a position of national civil unrest that the government cannot control, and we know they can't control it, that's going to give the West the chance to jump in with the so-called peacekeepers. Watch out for that, because what is the ultimate prize for the West in South Africa? Yeah, the minerals and so is alright, but that's not important. The Cape Sea route is important, vital. They would do anything to keep control over that. Currently they're fairly relaxed because the Cape is under control of the DA, which is a total fucking XXX puppet regime, and so the Cape Sea route is alright for the West. But never forget, BRICS is not going to allow the West to capture the Cape Sea route. At this point in time, the Cape Sea route geographical position is fairly neutral. That's the only reason why we haven't seen real shit yet. But the moment that this government collapses, the West is going to jump for Cape Town and for Simonstown specifically. And don't forget the oil and gas fields on the West Coast. So, on this evening, I've got a message for these black guys that are stirring so much racism shit. You better open your fucking eyes. XXX are going to wipe you out too. Will you survive? I don't think so, because you're unorganized. But you guys has got a bigger problem. You've got a bigger problem. 30 years have proven that you are totally incapable of handling a complex economy. You cannot do it. The proof is there. You can't do it. So, they're just going to take it from you, like they've already taken it. They've already taken most of it away. You're still sitting here keeping yourself busy with fucking dreams about Marxism and communism and Chinaism and cock like that, and writing fucking papers of how you want to do the economy and how you want to do the education and all that cock. And they're keeping you busy. They're giving you the papers and the pens so you can keep yourself busy. They know you can't make it work. You've proven it. You have proven that you can't make it work. You've got a fucking big problem. But when this government collapses, this shit's gonna fly. And I am afraid you won't be able to stop it. So it's going to be each man for himself. This evening, earlier, I passed a message, shared a news clip with my Mr. X, and he responded back to me, a stupid fucking response. Yeah, my ancestors, fled from Europe to Africa. Yes, they fled from Europe to Africa. They came here into Africa and they built. It was a news clip about how the Zimbabweans are streaming into our country. What he doesn't understand, he compared the Boere with the Zimbabweans. But he fucking don't get into his brain. I don't know what the reason is for it. Maybe you know what the reason is. But the Boere built South Africa. The Zimbabweans is destroying South Africa. But you think it's the same thing. But Moses 6 verse 6, stupid people must suffer. I don't know. Think about these things that I've mentioned to you. And I've got a message to the Boere. To the Boere. I'm now talking to my tribe. Keep your eyes open. You've had first-hand experience now with that fucker down there in Vryburg that poisoned the cattle. That guy was running a criminal syndicate. For how many years? Under the eyes of the police. The government allowed him to do it. Why? Because criminal gang control over the country is part of their mission. And I want to salute those guys, those young white Boere that stood up and said, okay, stop Ilori. You have now scored a try. I don't know if it's going to be allowed. Let's hear what the third ref says, what the TV ref says. Because that fucker must now appear in court. Let's see what happens there. But at least you have scored. We have now just have to wait to see if it's going to be allowed. And I look and I saw tonight on the TV news of how the criminals are killing the people in the townships. It is brutal, guys, but you should understand, the government, Cyril Ramaphosa and his gang, it's part of their plan to hand control of territories to criminal gangs. Let that sink in. Please give me a like and a subscribe and share the thing. Thank you for your support.